We're in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter number 20, and I want us to begin at verse 35 as we continue the story of David and Jonathan's arranged signal after Jonathan has figured out if his dad really does want David dead. And of course, the answer is yes, he does. In fact, when Jonathan gave the cover story, Saul became very angry and began to curse at his son, accuse him of being illegitimate, telling him he would never get into the throne if David kept living, and insisted that Jonathan give him up, which of course he won't. And Saul ends up throwing a spear at him, throwing a javelin at him. And Jonathan, by the grace of God, escapes. So he gets up from that dinner table at the evening of the kickoff for the second day of the month, and he goes out and grieves over everything that's happened. The fact that David is right, that his father has murderous intentions against him. So verse 35 says, "In the morning, Jonathan went out into the field to the appointment with David." Now the arrangement was that on the morning following the dinners, either on the first, second, or third days of the month, whichever day Jonathan finally got an answer from his dad, that David would be hiding out by this rock, and Jonathan would come and go through the signal procedure as to whether or not David should stay or go. So it didn't happen on the first. It happened on the second. So here we are during the daylight hours of the second of the month, and David is hiding by the rock. So Jonathan says to the young man that's with him, "Run, find the arrows that I shoot." So as the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. So he intentionally overshoots. That's according to the signal. When the boy came to the place of the arrow that Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the boy and said, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" And then apparently Jonathan gets overwhelmed with the emotion of the moment, the frustration that he has about his dad's murderous intentions, the fact that his close friend, his best friend, David, is under great, grave threat. He yells out, ostensibly to the boy that's running after this arrow. Says, "Hurry, be quick, don't stay." So I see the young boy being a little bit confused about why Prince Jonathan, is getting so worked up over the fact that, I got the arrows, I know where they're at, I can see them. Why is he telling me they're beyond me? Why is he telling me to hurry up and go find him? I got him. Well, he's not talking to the boy. He's talking to David. You got to go, David. You got to run. Don't stay here. My dad's going to kill you. See, that's what's coming through in this. And I have a hard time not getting emotional about this because it's killing Jonathan to come to this conclusion here. So Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows. He came back to his master. The boy knew nothing. He didn't understand what's going on. Only Jonathan and David knew the matter. So Jonathan gave his weapons to his boy and said to him, "Go, carry them into the city." So he wants to talk to David alone now. He had, I think, hoped that David would be able to pop out of the woods, pop out of the bushes, and everything would be okay because Jonathan to be able to undershoot and say, "No, they're closer, come near, come back." But that's not the way it played out. So after the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap. He fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. So he shows this honor, this deference, this blessing for his older royal friend. And then he gets back up and they kissed one another. They wept with one another. David weeping the most. And I don't think he's weeping for himself. Maybe a little bit, weeping over the idea that he can't stay and continue being with Jonathan, working with Jonathan, having this relationship. He has to go away now. I think he's weeping for Jonathan a lot. This is hard. His king, his father-in-law, is Jonathan's dad. And Jonathan has found out that his dad wants to murder someone that is completely innocent. That is a hard thing to wrestle with. And I'm sure Jonathan told him the story that Dad tried to kill him by throwing a spear at him. It's one thing for that to have happened to David, but for that to have happened to poor Prince Jonathan, to have his flesh and blood father try to murder him, that's got to be hard too. So I see David crying big time on behalf of Jonathan here. So Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace. We've sworn, both of us, in the name of he who is saying, he who is shall be between me and you, between my offspring and your offspring forever." So we have made our promises in the sight and in the name of God that we will always have each other's backs and that we will look after each other's families, no matter what. And so then he rose and he departed. So David leaves and Jonathan went back into the city. Now it's often come to my mind, why didn't Jonathan just go with him? And the only answer that I can come to, the only conclusion I can come to, is that Jonathan probably felt his dad needed him more. That David was in the hands of God, that God's Holy Spirit was guiding him. He was going to be okay, no matter what. But his dad is in a crisis. His dad is, for all practical purposes, lost. He's lost his way. He's been oppressed by this demonic spirit for over a decade. And I think Jonathan is of the conviction that he needed to stay and see if he could redeem his father, see if he could save his father. And you know what? Good on him. If that's the reason why he stayed, good on him. But here's the thing. It will cost him his life. Because he will be there on the battlefield when everything falls apart and his dad dies because of the judgment of God. So we're going to keep that in mind. Chapter 21. So David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. Now, no one knows for sure where Nob is at. I am going to make a suggestion to you that it may in fact be the place that tradition says Samuel is buried. There is a tell, that is an archaeological built-up site that's a little bit south of Gibeon. that is associated with the tomb of King Saul. But that doesn't make any sense because that is in the province of Benjamin. That's in the tribal region of Benjamin. And we know that Samuel was buried in his hometown, which was in the province or the tribal region of Ephraim, Ramah Zophaim, up by Bethel. So I wonder whether or not this place just south of Gibeon that has a strong association with Prophet Samuel is actually Nob, the place where the priests lived and where Samuel probably came to from time to time in order to be participant in the worship ceremony at the tabernacle that was eventually established at Gibeon. So with that thesis in mind, let's understand this as being kind of the residence city of the high priest and all the priests that do the daily ceremonies at the re-established tabernacle at Gibeon. That's my thesis for you. So that's where David goes. He's been there before. Ahimelech came to meet David trembling. So he's a little bit nervous that David shows up unannounced. See, that's unusual apparently. And he said to him, "Why are you alone? And why is there no one with you?" So apparently when David comes usually to get a blessing to go through a sacrifice ceremony before he goes out on maneuvers, it's him and his men. So this is an unusual arrival of David. So David said to Ahimelech the priest, "The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, 'Let no one know anything of the matter about which I send you and with which I have charged you. I've made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place.'" So this is David's cover story. King Saul has not sent him on this mission, but he is going to meet some of his men. That arrangement has been made. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he used Jonathan as the conduit to get his most trustworthy men to meet him at a secret location. Now, David, we know, was the commander over 1,000 men. We know that 600 guys will eventually meet with him. So maybe not all of them were trustworthy in the estimation of David or whoever was passing on the message. But the information that he gives to Ahimelech the high priest is, yes, I'm on a special mission. It's top secret. Nobody's supposed to know about it. My guys are waiting elsewhere. Verse number 3. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here. See, because he doesn't have any supplies. He's on the run, and he needs supplies not just for himself, but he also needs supplies for his guys whenever he gets with them. The priest answered David, "Oh, I have no common bread on hand, but there is the holy bread." So this tells me that they have arrived on the Sabbath day. David has arrived on the Sabbath day, where it is customary that the bread from the previous week would be eaten by the priests, and on the end of the Sabbath day, and new bread would be immediately baked at the beginning of the new week, when the sun goes down, starting the first day of the week, and be put back on the table of the bread of the presence. So I think he's apparently arrived on a Sabbath day at the residency area for the priests of the tabernacle. So the only bread that's around is the bread of the presence. The high priest makes an offer that he really shouldn't have made. And Jesus actually makes this point in his reference to this event in the New Testament. You can find it in Matthew 12, Mark 2, Luke 6, where the Pharisees are giving the apostles a hard time about breaking tradition. And Jesus' response is, apparently you guys were fine when the high priest broke law in order to help David out. But you're against breaking tradition. And that's not appropriate. Okay, so here's the deal. The bread of the presence was only supposed to be eaten by clean priests on duty in the tabernacle whenever this changeover happened. It's not supposed to go to common people. But Ahimelech, wanting to help David out, living, I suppose, at the tail end of the period of the judges, remember, when everybody just did whatever they felt was appropriate, he decides to try to make an exception to the rule. But he makes a rule about the exception to the rule. He says, I have no common bread on hand, but there is the holy bread if the young men have kept themselves from women. Meaning, as long as the young men are clean ceremonially from any sexual activity. And so David's response was this: well, truly, women have been kept from us as always when I go on an expedition. So apparently the tradition was when they got ready to go on a military mission, they abstained from sexual relationships with their wives before they went to the tabernacle and offered sacrifices and got the blessing of the priest before they went on their maneuver. So David says, well, that's the way we always do it. How much more today will their vessels be holy? So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed from before he who is to be replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. Now, that happens out in the open, where it can be seen, apparently. Now, certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before he who is. His name was Doeg, the Edomite, the chief of Saul's herdsmen. So here we have somebody that works for King Saul. He's in charge of the animals. He's at Gibeon probably to bring certain sacrificial animals to be offered on behalf of the king, on behalf of the kingdom. And he happens to see some of this stuff that we're reading about happen. And he's going to rat David and the high priest out. Verse 8. Then David said to Ahimelech, then have you not here a spear or a sword at hand? For I have brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. Now, this is a really badly thought out cover story. A military guy does not have a go bag. He doesn't have his weapons ready to go. Now, we know the reason why he doesn't have his weapons, his armor and stuff like that, is because he went out the window just a few days ago trying to get away from his murderous father-in-law. So he doesn't have his equipment. So he has asked for, food supplies. Now he asks, hey, by any chance do you happen to have like a sword or a spear around here? Because I had to leave so quick, I didn't bring my stuff. So the priest said, well, the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. Now you remember, on our commentary about the defeat of Goliath, I told you that I believe that David took the armor of Goliath after it was stripped off of him and donated it to the tabernacle. Put it in the tent. His tent, meaning God's tent. Well, this is a good support for that, because that's where the weaponry of the giant is stored. The sword of Goliath is right behind the ephod stand. The ephod, remember, is the special uniform that the high priest wears for priestly duty. And so right behind, wherever it's stored, is the weaponry and the donated armor of Goliath. And so that's the only thing that he can think of. Well, there's always that sword. Well, David, the last time he used it was a kid. Now he is a much older military commander with a lot of experience and probably a lot of muscle power. And so, yeah, that sword will work. If you take it, for there is none here, none but that here. And so David said, oh, there's none like it. Give it to me. So David now is armed, and he is supplied, and he goes out to meet with his soldiers. Now, before he gets there, he cuts through Philistine territory. Why he does this is probably just a matter of trying to stay out of the potential patrol range of Saul's secret army, the guys that are out looking for him. So David rose, he fled that day from Saul, and went to Achish, the king of Gath. The servants of Achish said to him, "Is this not David, the king of the land?" Now, it's interesting, the king of the land, because apparently they're mocking the idea that Saul is king when David is the one that does all the military stuff. He's the guy that does all the major fights. Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. Now, David, who's just cutting through, is probably not happy that he got recognized. And so he took these words to heart and was much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them, pretended to be insane in their hands. Apparently they grabbed him, arrested him, took him into custody to present him to Achish as, a potential war criminal, if you will. And so he makes marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down into his beard. So the moment he realizes that he is being taken into custody, he puts on an act. He starts letting his spit just run out of his mouth. He maybe foams it up a little bit more than it usually is. And as they're taking him away, he's like scratching at the doorposts and probably making all sorts of weird statements and comments and noises. Because, and this has always puzzled me, the ancient world had this idea that crazy people had been touched by the gods, and therefore you just let them go. You left them alone. You didn't do anything with them. You just tolerated them. And so David is apparently depending upon that sort of attitude. And so Achish, as soon as he sees David, foaming at the mouth, spit drooling out of his mouth, and doing all sorts of weird things, Achish said to his servants, "Behold, you can see that the man's mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you've brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? Are you kidding me? Why is he even here? Get rid of him." And so David is taken out of the city and let go. And now he ends up where he was intending to go in the first place. Chapter 22. David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. Now, Adullam is in the hill country of Judah, actually the Shephelah of Judah. It's down by the valley of Elah. It is the place that he apparently told his people to meet him. Not only his guys, but his family. When his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. So his family is meeting him here. Very wise, because more than likely Saul would have reprisals against them, maybe thinking that he could use them to get at David. But it's not just them. It says, everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him. So he has got a lot of people that have been taxed too much by King Saul, or have been drafted in ways that they didn't like into his service, or had their kids drafted into his service, or maybe their properties have been confiscated. All the things that Samuel, at God's direction, had told the people would happen if they had the type of king they were looking for. He would turn into a tyrant. And so all of those sorts of people are starting to arrive with King David. And he became commander over them, and there was with him about 400 men. I stand corrected. The 600 comes up later. He ends up with 600 people in his initial encampment here at the cave of Adullam. Next time we get into the Word, we will see how he protects his family.